Today's episode is brought to you by LaRosse Media. They make professional videos to fit any budget, so next time you need a commercial, promo, or corporate video, think LaRosse. Check them out at larossemedia.com. Hello and welcome to the Stinking Albatross Podcast. My name is Alyssa Globe, and I'm here once again with my partner in crime, co-host Scott Michael Hayward. Not to be confused with Michael Scott from The Office. How's it going, Scott?
Way to just toss my middle name out there. And everyone can find me. No problem.
Your SIN number and everything.
That's right. I think now you need to tell people your middle name.
Marie, it's a good middle name. Anywho.
Well, Alyssa, Marie, you and I are going to be seeing each other in a few hours.
Well, sure. 15 hours or something, but okay. Yeah, you're coming to Calgary.
Yeah, Alyssa and I are doing, we're doing some fundraising presentations, and Alyssa is out to Chilliwack, and I am through Calgary on my way to Regina. So make sure this time, Alyssa, that we don't forget this.
Yes, bring the camera. That'd be awesome.
I had it the whole time last time, so we just can't forget it this time.
Something weird, my right eye, my eyelid, right here, it won't stop twitching. And it hasn't stopped twitching for 5 days. And I'm starting to get concerned. Is that a sign of a brain tumor?
You're not drinking enough milk. Well, you'd have to have a brain for that, but...
Yeah.
Usually eye twitches mean that you're not drinking enough milk.
Well, I Googled it and it said you're tired or stressed. And I'm like, that's daily, and I've never had a eye twitch, so I don't know.
Yeah, that doesn't seem right. Yeah.
We'll see if I'm still alive by the time you get here, but that's my big news for the week. My twitching eyelid. What's up with you?
It's Lent. We had our mutual friend Chris over on Shrove Tuesday for a little Shrove Tuesday party / his belated birthday. We had cocktails, we had ribs, we had cheese, we had everything. And then midnight came and that was a hard cutoff. And here we are. And then, right on cue. It's been quite lovely here, actually, down in Southern Ontario for the past month or so. And then all the snow and rain and freezing rain came in for the beginning of Lent. And it's supposed to be like this for the next 2 weeks. So
fabulous.
Here we are.
And that's why you're leaving.
Yeah. That's right.
Yeah,
to somewhere that's even colder and more snowy.
So are you just going to Regina or anywhere else?
Well, it's so stupid. So you and I were talking about this last week about potentially you going to Regina because it's just one fundraising presentation and you're that much closer. And I understand you're on mat leave and everything, but you had volunteered. So we had looked into getting flights for you from Calgary to Regina. And I think the least expensive one we found was $800 one way. So I'm flying to Calgary tonight, overnight, and then tomorrow evening I fly from Calgary to Brandon. And then I am going to it's providential because we have a pro-life nomination contestant and her nomination's Saturday afternoon. So I'm going to head down there because it's just south of Brandon for that provincial riding and help out with GOTV, get out the vote efforts. And then the presentations on the Monday, and then Tuesday I drive back to Brandon and fly out of Brandon, Calgary, Toronto all in one day. And it saved us over $1,000 doing it over the course of a few days through Brandon as opposed to Regina. It was just ridiculous. So yeah, I guess for work, the one and only place I need to be is Regina, but there's a lot of stops on the way to there and on the way back.
Right. Yeah, I'm flying with Flair this time. It's one of those cheapy airlines. And I don't know how it's going to go. I haven't ever flown with them before. And they just came to Calgary. So I'm flying Calgary to Abbotsford. So we'll see what happens. Hopefully they're not delayed or there's not any cancellations because I'm flying in and out in less than 24 hours. So I'll be there for, 12 hours and then flying home. So we'll see what happens. Fingers crossed. I'll have an update next podcast.
Yeah.
Cliffhanger.
Yeah, exactly. We almost got to do the podcast together.
Yeah.
We might as well just done it 1 a.m. at the airport when you picked me up.
Exactly. All right, well, let's get into it. So, the first topic that we want to talk about is an update on medical assistance in dying, otherwise known as physician assisted suicide or MAID. That's the term they try to like cloak it in to make it sound better than it actually is. But there was a Justice Committee report, a House Committee report, excuse me, that just came out that went along.
Both. It was a joint committee.
Oh,
It was
right,
both
right.
senators
Yeah.
and members of the House.
So
Yeah.
there was a joint committee report, and then there was a bill that was put forward by Justice Minister David Lametti to postpone expanding physician-assisted suicide due to mental illness for 1 year. And then there was another bill by a Liberal senator who wants to basically what's the word? Have those who have Alzheimer's or other conditions. What's the term for it? I'm totally blanking right now. Delayed, like to make a delayed advanced directives. So she put forward a bill that will allow advanced requests simultaneously, and then also a Conservative MP, Ed Fast, is putting forward a bill that will more than likely be defeated, but the premise is to not allow physician-assisted suicide to expand to people with mental illness. So there's been a lot going on, right? In the past few weeks when it comes to MAID. But let's just start with the Justice Committee report because there's a lot of crazy stuff in here. So I'll throw it over to you, Scott, just to start us off.
Yeah. I like to go through a couple of them. So the committee report made, 23 recommendations. And I just want to read, I'm not going to read all of them out, but I want to read out a few of them just so people know. There is a little bit of good stuff in there, but it's mostly bad. So recommendation number 4 is dealing with Indigenous populations. And that is that the government of Canada work with First Nations, Inuit, and Métis partners, relevant organizations such as the Canadian Association of MAID Assessors and Providers, regulatory authorities, and health professional associations to increase awareness of the importance of engaging with First Nations, Inuit, Métis on the subject of MAID. The importance of that is that amongst the Indigenous population in Canada, they already have a very, very high suicide rate. And for many, many years, decades really, both federal and provincial and territorial governments have put a lot of money, I don't know about effort, but put a lot of money into trying to reduce the suicide rates, especially amongst young Indigenous people. So this recommendation is not necessarily a bad recommendation per se, but that's really where the good news ends. Recommendation number 5, that the Government of Canada, through Corrections Service Canada, support approved Track 1 MAID recipients being able to die outside a prison setting only for the event itself and any immediate preparatory palliative care that is required. So, if you are wanting to seek palliative care, anything like a prisoner, I don't think there's any sort of legislation on that. But, if you want to seek government assistance in dying as a prisoner in the corrections institutions, then you can receive that outside of the prison.
Well, obviously.
Obviously, yeah. Number 6 is actually a good one. I don't think they'll do anything with it, though. Recommendation number 6 is that the Government of Canada, through relevant federal departments and respecting the jurisdiction of provinces and territories, consider increasing funding for the implementation of the Action Plan on Palliative Care, building on the framework of palliative care in Canada, and make targeted and sustained investments in innovative approaches and early-stage research aimed at improving health system performance and quality of care for people living with life-limiting illness and their caregivers. Number 8 is kind of interesting. Recommendation 8 is that the Government of Canada, in collaboration with the provinces and territories, work to develop data systems to collect disaggregated data for Black, Indigenous, racialized, disabled, LGBTQ+ communities beyond the regulations that went into force on January 1, 2023. And this is where things get a little off the rails here. Recommendation number 11. That the Government of Canada, through the Department of Justice and in consultation with organizations representing persons with disabilities, explore potential amendments to the criminal code that would avoid stigmatizing persons with disabilities without restricting their access to MAID. Options considered should include replacing references to disability in Section 241.2, subsection 2 of the Criminal Code with attention to the potential legal ramifications of such an amendment across Canada. Basically, this recommendation is saying that we should look at amending the criminal code to allow for government assistance in dying for people with disabilities. And then number 14, 15, and 16 all kind of deal with the same one. But I'm just going to read out the first one because it's quite grotesque. Um, Recommendation 14, that the government of Canada undertake consultations with minors on the topic of MAID, including minors with terminal illnesses, minors with disabilities, minors in the child welfare system, and Indigenous minors within 5 years of the tabling of this report. And the other recommendations, 15 and 16, are dealing with expanding assisted suicide to kids. But here's the one that really, really got me that's dark. Recommendation number 19, that the government of Canada establish a requirement that, where appropriate, the parents or guardians of a mature minor be consulted in the course of the assessment process for MAID, but that the will of a minor who is found to have the requisite decision-making capacity ultimately take priority.
Mm-hmm.
So that's kind of my findings from the report, Alyssa. I don't know if you found some other stuff. So a couple of good things, though not great. Important to highlight that, but a lot of things going off the rails real quick here.
Yeah, and I mean the Dr. Louis Roy, who is the part of the Quebec College of Physicians, he made news earlier on telling this specific joint committee in October that MAID should be considered for babies born with severe deformities and very serious syndromes for which the chances of survival are virtually nil, which we all know they're wrong about on a regular basis. There's floods and floods of stories out online and elsewhere where doctors have made wrong diagnoses on unborn children with different disabilities, which actually haven't happened. In fact, my brother Patrick, my mother was told that my brother Patrick would be born with Down syndrome, and he in fact was not born with Down syndrome, and so he tells people that he had Down syndrome, but he got over it. So
such resiliency.
Yeah. But I mean, this shouldn't be surprising because of how the people with disabilities, people with Down syndrome, are treated with such disdain in the womb. So it would make sense that outside of the womb, as children or mature minors, they would be treated with the same sort of discriminatory treatment. But it is very terrifying as a mother, and I'm sure for you as a father, that we can be consulted, but that our children can make these decisions legally without our approval. That is horrifying, considering the plethora of things that children are not allowed to do without our consent, but they can kill themselves. Like, make it make sense.
Yeah, exactly. Well, I mean, and we'll talk about this on other shows, and we'll talk about on shows after this, but the idea of parental rights, particularly regarding teenagers, is not slowly but quite quickly being eroded away anyway. Like, you look at the education system, and now that there's more and more light, and of course light is the best disinfectant, on what is actually being taught in publicly funded schools in the different provinces across Canada, now you have a bunch of teachers and professional educators, so to speak. They're saying, well, how dare parents intervene, and like, what the hell do they know? We're going to teach their kids. So if you have kids in the public system, you should definitely take them out. Now, in this report, though, Alyssa, there was dissension from a few of the Conservative members who were on the committee. And so I just wanted to highlight a couple of things here. So when it comes to mature minors, it's interesting because the dissension report from the Conservatives says that the Conservatives do not support MAID for mature minors at this time, which really pissed me off, because it's like, you should just not support MAID for any minors. You just not support medical assistance in dying, period.
Yeah, like if the polls change, will they change? Like, that's so
exactly.
Insane. Yeah.
Exactly. And their reasons for it is like, they say things like, so as long as, there's a knowledge gap, there's not enough information, there needs to be more studies, we need to consult with minors on this. There's not a professional consensus. Well, what if there is a professional consensus? Of course, there probably wouldn't be, but as you know, and as Dr. Peterson can say, as a psychologist, the professional colleges and the professional bodies are being overtaken by cultural Marxists. So what if you have 8 of the 10 provincial colleges of physicians and surgeons come out and say, oh yeah, no, if a depressed transsexual 16-year-old wants to kill themselves, then they should be able to do so. Like where this is the thing that really, really it pissed me off about this dissension is that the dissension was not that widespread.
Mm-hmm.
It was in very specific instances.
Mm-hmm.
So mature minors, but with caveats. I will give the conservatives they completely disagree with the expansion of assisted suicide to those with mental health
Which makes no sense to
issues.
me. Like, I really would like to get a conservative MP or senator on here asking why they are so staunch against expanding physician assisted suicide to those with mental illness, which I completely agree with. But they are like relatively silent on mature minors. Like, wouldn't you think that mature minors, children, having the right without parental consent, or even parents just being consulted, would be a much more winning issue than those with mental illness? Like, I'm very confused at this strategy.
Well, here's the thing, and I think the answer is right in the dissension report itself, because when it comes to advanced directives, right, which you said has come out of Quebec
Hmm.
from that Superior Court decision, and then from the Quebec Liberal senator, um, the conservative members of the committee dissent from advanced directives. Again, their reasoning being, well, there's not enough information or study on this. Instead of arguing from like an actual conservative, big and small C, philosophical perspective that we shouldn't
Yeah.
have this, they're just saying, oh, there needs to be more study. But even from that, there's a dissension from the lone Quebec conservative MP, Dominique Vienne, that was on the committee, and she said that she completely supports advanced directives. And I think that's the rub
Mm-hmm.
that you're finding in the Conservative caucus is that you have these Quebec MPs, and not saying that every Quebec Conservative MP supports all this expansion for assisted suicide, but I have heard it from different staffers on the Hill within the last few weeks, different Conservative staffers, that there is a big difference within the Conservative caucus between like the 10 or 9 conservative Quebec MPs and basically the rest of caucus.
Yeah.
And so I don't know why someone like Pierre Poilievre, who only had the support of one Quebec MP during the leadership race, being Pierre Paul Housse, cares of what the other 8 think about when you have another like 110 people in your caucus, not including, of course, the 20 or so conservative senators who are also like someone like oh, pardon me, what's her name from Saskatchewan?
Senator Batters.
Thank you, Denise Batters, who's very staunch on this issue. Like, why do you care about such a minority in your caucus?
Mm-hmm.
And this is going to be a big problem for the conservatives, because if they can't find the gumption, if they can't find the fortitude to argue against medical assistance in dying, against assisted suicide for kids,
Mm-hmm.
for people who are disabled, and like all these disability groups across Canada completely disagree with it, and the
Mm-hmm.
government's ignoring them. And for years and years and years, there's been a bit of a rift between disability advocacy groups and right-wing conservative parties in Canada because of funding issues.
Yeah.
Like, this is a big opportunity politically, not to be crass, to expand into a whole new vote pool for you. And
Yeah.
you're scared about what 8 MPs from Quebec have to say. Like, this was the whole point of electing Pierre Poilievre as leader, was that we're going to have this fortitude on conservative policy, and it's not coming through when it matters.
Yeah, it's insane that these Quebec MPs are being prioritized over the rest of caucus, especially given the basic talking point that MAID has the highest deaths per capita in MAID deaths than anywhere else in the entire world. Like, you guys are obsessed with physician-assisted suicide, so we're not really going to take your lead on this one, maybe. Like, I can think of the Netherlands and Belgium and other places that have had this for far longer, and Quebec has the highest per capita in the world. Like, that's insane. It went from like 300 in 2016 to like almost 5,000 in 2021.
7% of deaths in Quebec in, I believe, either 2021 or 2022 were because of assistance in dying, because of assisted suicide.
Yeah, so if I were a conservative MP, not from Quebec, obviously, I would be like, I would be very outraged about this, because it's so black and white. It's so incredibly black and white to actually push really hard on mature. This is such a winning topic. Even I think Angus Reid had a poll out, and
Yes.
it said that the majority of like 30% of Canadians agree with expanding it to mental illness. I don't know what it was with mature minors, but I can only imagine it's less than that. So this is a hugely winning issue. Like, to let these conservative Quebec MPs overrule polling, consensus, and just common sense, and to protect the vulnerable, those with disabilities, children, is insane. Like, step up and do your job as the official opposition, please.
Now, it's interesting because when Bill C-39 came, and it is before the House right now, and that's the bill you're referring to, Alyssa, that delays the implementation of expanding government assistance in dying to those with mental health issues by a year. When the Conservative, because staffers have told me this, and more than one, when the Conservative Whip's office contacted the different MPs' offices to say, hey, would you like to speak to this bill during debate in the House? They were told that you could only speak to it on mental health aspect. You can't talk about other things. You can't talk about disability. You can't talk about the potentiality of it being expanded to kids or anything like that. And so many of the pro-life Conservative MPs thankfully just ignored that dumbass directive from the Whip's office and talked about it in all these speeches last week, which was great to see.
Respectfully, here's my middle finger. To the
exactly.
office.
So I'm glad to see that pro-life MPs that we helped get nominated and elected had the fortitude, the courage to go out there and speak truth to power. Not just truth to power for the Liberals, but apparently truth to power from the Leader's office and the Whip's office. And hopefully that's a sign to both the Leader's office and the Whip's office and the Quebec MPs that they're not going to be silenced, and they're going to talk about this because it is important. It is interesting. I will give credit to Erin O'Toole on this, because when Erin O'Toole was leader, the Conservative caucus altogether opposed all of this across the board. And now with Pierre as leader, he seems to be allowing a lot of the Quebec MPs to call the shots, and that didn't happen under Erin. So this is an interesting development to see.
Yeah, it's bad when we're saying that it was better in this particular case under Erin O'Toole than Pierre. Like, get your act together. Honestly, it's disturbing. And for those of you who, want to know what actually is happening in Canada to real people when it comes to MAID, there was a trending hashtag I am the face of MAID, which one person started it about their specific experience, and then a whole lot of other people started to jump on and talk about their experiences about being victimized by Canada's MAID laws. A lot of people who are who have disabilities, who are impoverished, who have been offered and even encouraged and told that they were selfish if they didn't actually accept MAID. So this is something that's happening. We always talk about the slippery slope. The slippery slope is no longer here. We are actually, that's not a threat. We are at the bottom of the slope at this point when it comes to actually expanding it to mature minors, and what it's actually doing to people in Canada and those who need assistance, who need help, and are instead being offered death. We did post a video, I think last week, of a woman who was supposed to die on February 13th, 2023. She has 17 different chronic illnesses. She's a young woman from Toronto, and she made a TikTok video, which I posted, and basically saying how she applied for MAID in May, because of this, was immediately accepted, and then pulled out of it in August, thankfully. But she chose the date to have MAID on the same day that her father had died, which was February 13th. And on February 13th, she made this video saying how she's so happy, despite her chronic illnesses, that she chose life, and she's celebrating that day with family and friends and people who love her and were encouraging her not to go through with it. So I thought that was a pretty uplifting story. It got a little bit of coverage, and I hope that more people speak out about what's happening in the medical profession, what's happening to them personally, so that we can not expand physician-assisted suicide, get the palliative care and different options, suicide prevention, and things that need to happen to people in vulnerable situations, and not further go down into the underground when it comes to the slippery slope.
We live in a world that grows through communication.
Every connection comes from a dream to be heard and realized.
To welcome a better future. What are your dreams?
LaRosse Media will help communicate your vision through our professional video production services and marketing strategies.
Start building connections to your future audience. Visit larossemedia.com
and be sure to check out our extended service options.
Dream, produce, market, succeed with LaRosse Media.
Serving Canada from coast to coast to coast.
On a different note, Scott, you went into a little bit of a Twitter back and forth with former Conservative MP and Cabinet Minister James Moore. For those of you who don't know, the Manning Centre, now called the Canada Strong and
Canada's
Free,
strong and free. Yeah.
which one of the heads is Jamil Javani, who is a journal, or he writes for the National Post. He does videos. Very good guy, well spoken, really good on the issues. And they were holding an event about critical race theory, and a lot of people were, naysayers were saying that it's just an American issue. And then James Moore hopped on and said that what has the Manning Center devolved into, and that it's such a shame. And you responded, and later on, Jamila responded with an actual video, but I'll let you take that one on as well.
Yeah, so it's interesting. So people can go check out on my Twitter and check out the thread. And my handle on Twitter is @ScottMHayward. Basically, I said, we need fewer James Moores and more Jamil Javanis within the conservative movement, and most especially within conservative parties. Because if you're going to ignore what is being taught in publicly funded education systems, then you're gonna lose a bunch of future voters for the Conservative Party of Canada. And I also kind of challenged James Moore, on an actual social issue, like what difference is there between you and the Liberal Party of Canada, like on abortion, on transgendered issues, on medical assistance in dying, government assistance dying, assisted suicide? Like where do you actually differ? Or are you just a social liberal that wants to balance the books? Because we're not interested in that. And the new Manning Center, the Canada Strong and Free, is obviously not interested in just that. Not saying that those things aren't important, but it goes beyond that. And I tweeted something out, I think it was earlier today or yesterday. There was a poll out from the True North Center, had a story about it. I can't remember the polling firm, that a good number, and I don't know exactly what the percentage is, but I think it's close to the majority of young Canadians think that the best economic system is socialism as opposed to capitalism. And, you have these basically 1990s, milk toast, 1990s Republican milquetoast type of conservatives like James Moore being like, I just want to talk about lowering the tax rate by 2 or 3%. And that's all we should focus on. And yet, when you focus on that, guess what? Even on the issue of the one thing that you actually care about, being capitalism, the one thing that differs you from the NDP, you're losing the youth anyway. Because if you don't pay attention to what's happening in schools, you're going to lose them on a philosophical basis that goes beyond just, basic economic system. So anyway,
why do you think the Liberals are so intent on controlling the school system? Because if you control how people think, you control how they act. And so they're actually doing it right by starting at a young age, by starting with the public system. You're doing it all wrong, Betty, by thinking like later when you get elected that when they are voting age, they're going to start listening to you about balancing the books. Like, that's not how it works.
Yeah. As if most people these days who can't even afford a home, especially where James Moore is from in Vancouver, care about whether or not, their provincial or federal governments are balancing the books. Again, I'm not saying it's not an important issue. To me personally, it's a big important issue. But on the grand scheme of things, like, when you have to spend 67% of your income on housing, which is way, 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 way unsustainable in major markets like Toronto and Vancouver, they're not going to care about that. So, and speaking about, cultural Marxists taking over the education system, it's really starting to pour over into the public in places like Ontario. Because we've seen a couple stories come out of Ontario. And of course there was...
I just want to say, like, I do. And I also think that James Moore should let the black conservative, like Jamil Javani, take on something like critical race theory. Like, I don't think you really know what you're talking about. And and people were talking about it being like an American issue when the Empire Club of Canada, which Jamil said in his video, brought in speakers to specifically talk about how to bring in critical race theory into the school system. And there was no outcry from that, but there was only outcry from these establishment elite conservatives when they try to respond in an oppositional way, which is the problem with a lot of conservatives right now as well. Like, they have it in the States, the rhinos, Republicans in name only, and we have that here. And James Moore and Michelle Rempel, a liberal in a cowboy hat, is also one of them, right? So
Chrystia Freeland in a
Oh yeah,
cowboy
that's what you
hat.
said.
That's
Yeah,
how I
Chris
describe her.
Hoover.
Yeah.
So yeah, but I think this is a good segue because someone who is also very critical of the education system is Jamil Javani, who has recently kind of gone back and forth with Dr. Peterson, who's also talked about the school system, and they've called out Doug Ford and Education Minister Stephen Lecce for bringing in just insane things into the public and the Catholic school system, and we've seen different stories come from that as well.
Yeah. So what happened with this one gentleman? I can't remember his name. You might remember Josh Alexander.
Mm-hmm.
He is a student that goes to a publicly funded Catholic school out in Renfrew, which is about an hour west of Ottawa. So you're talking like that. That's one of the most safest, solidly conservative federal and provincial ridings in all of Ontario, in all of the country. So like deep. I mean, Alyssa, you went to post-secondary school in the county next door, so like you know how conservative the area is.
Comically
and,
so.
Yeah, so he got suspended from school in November of 2022 because he would not assent to the fact he would not assent to there being more than two genders. He said, no, there's just two genders, male, female. And so they said, well, we're kicking you out of public school and you're not allowed to come back. And so in February, he was just like, well, I'm just going to walk in and see what happens. And so he went into class, whatever, he was calm about it. And so they had to call in the cops, and they actually had to bring in the cops to arrest him and take him off property because he wouldn't say there are two genders at a publicly funded Catholic school. And so I had tweeted out, is there going to be any federal conservative MP? Is there going to be any provincial conservative MPP that's going to speak out against this? What about Stephen Lecce, the Minister of Education? And there was just silence. Now, to be fair, there was a progressive conservative MPP that did message me about it. He said, Scott, I saw your tweet. This is very disturbing. I want to get the full story. Like, was he suspended for other reasons that we're not aware of? Because if he was just suspended for what Brian Lidley had reported in the Toronto Sun, then yeah, that's something I definitely want to follow up with. So it's interesting because when we throw out these tweets and these little spicy things, let's say, we think like, oh, it's going to fall on deaf ears and nothing's going to happen. But it sounds like this MPP is going to try and do something behind the scenes.
Yeah, but you know what? I also feel like that's total bullshit, because whenever there's a story, like say there was a story opposite of that, like where someone was suspended for saying that there are more than two genders. Like, I can guarantee you that immediately tons of Liberal MPs and Liberal MPPs and NDP MPPs would immediately tweet out about it. They would tweet out about it. They'd speak about it. They'd be on the news. So they wouldn't look into the story and see it. Like, whatever. That's sort of like a cop-out. Like, this is what happened. This is what he was told in the principal's office. Like, regardless of if there's another story or not, that's what his firsthand account, and you should be pissed off about that. I don't care about you doing your own research, Sherlock Holmes. Like, let's actually get some proper opposition to this.
I mean, that's fair enough. And Dr. Peterson and Jamil Javani both called out Doug Ford, Stephen Lecce, and Dr. Peterson, this is interesting to me, also called out Pierre Poilievre. And the thing is that as this develops, like both Pierre and eventually Doug and like other conservatives are going to have to start talking about issues other than just inflation. And it's you think of Ontario, like Doug Ford won the super majority in June of 2022, and what's being done with it? They're basically implementing cultural Marxist agendas within the school system. We talk about, I think he goes by Kayla Lemire. That's the Oakville teacher of the giant fake breasts. All Stephen Lecce, all Stephen Lecce said was, the school board didn't handle this properly. They need to handle it properly.
Yeah.
Like, why not? You're the Minister of Education. You could eliminate that school board right away. I don't even think you need legislation. You just need a ministerial directive. Like, actually come down on this, actually do something about it. And because it's not just parents who are complaining about this situation in Oakville, it's also students as well.
Absolutely. Where do you think all the video footage and the pictures come from? Like,
Yeah,
it's
exactly.
from the students in the school who are like, what the hell is happening? And interesting update on that story is that a neighbor actually took pictures of this guy Kayla Lemieux out in public in men's clothes. Like, he dresses like a normal man outside of the school system. And the neighbor said that she's seen him dress like this, only wear the prosthetic breasts when he goes to school, and sometimes when the cops come to visit, because they've had to do like welfare checks and stuff given the amount of publicity. So, like, is this some sort of weird ass fetish that is happening around high school students? Like, it's extremely bizarre.
Well, okay, so it's a Kayla Lemieux, because it was the New York Post that had run that story about, like, hey, like, Buddy is just normal guy outside of high school. So Kayla had approached both the Toronto Sun and I believe the New York Post, denied that picture was of him, and then told them that he has this condition called, let me get this right, gigantomastia. Basically, it's this super rare condition that usually happens to women during pregnancy, or because it's just that this is an imbalance of hormones, and women during pregnancy or during breastfeeding will grow very, very, very large breasts. And although I don't think Z cups, double Zs or whatever they are, is one of them. Anyway, according to this clinic in Cleveland that I guess specializes in this, there's only been 300 cases ever known around the world. Kayla is saying that he is one of them, and that he's not trans, but he's intersex. So the story seems to be changing by the day, by the week. And of course, what's happening? This guy gets to keep teaching kids in a what's supposed to be safe environment, and the school board and the Minister of Education, who's a supposed conservative, are doing dick all about it.
I saw a really good meme where it showed Kayla Lemieux and it said, this person's allowed in the school system. And then it showed a grade 11 Josh Alexander, normal, like, grade 11 guy, saying this guy is not allowed in the school system. Like, this is what it's come to in Ontario, in Canada. So this isn't like, oh, you know, Canada's much better than, you know, our neighbors in the South. You know, America, they have all this woke nonsense, critical race theory, all this trans stuff. No, this is happening to an even worse extent. Like, we're a laughingstock internationally when it comes to this person teaching in the school system. It's a very bizarre situation what's going on. Obviously, mental health issues. If this person actually thinks they have some sort of actually biological disorder that only happens to biological women, like, it's just absolutely crazy. And you know, the best thing that we can do is we have to fight it. We can't just throw up our arms and say, you know, we have to say enough is enough, and actually get involved in municipal elections, provincial elections, federal elections, and also get out these deadbeats like Doug Ford and Stephen Lecce. Like, they are only furthering the progressive agenda. There's no different than actually electing a liberal. So we have to get in at that very, you know, top level and just clean house.
Well, I appreciate what Jamil Javani's doing.
Yeah,
right?
absolutely.
Like taking over the Manning Center and making it actually something. Like, I don't know if you recall, Alyssa, but for the past few years before the COVID-19 restrictions, going to the Manning Center conferences, they were so boring. Like, it was talking about, should we have another version of the conservative carbon tax? You know, what should the tax rate be? Like, there was no like actual discussion on conservative philosophy on any social issues. There's hardly any discussion about, you know, criminology and prison reform, or any discussion on foreign policy, military, any of that type of stuff. It was just about tax rates and carbon tax, and maybe like pipelines, right? Like, okay, great, we all support pipelines, let's move on. But Jamil's actually want to talk about like actual real issues that are frankly affecting conservative parties and future conservative voters.
Yeah.
And he actually worked in Premier Doug Ford's office, right in the Premier's office. He had left on his own volition because he said, you're not doing anything, so like, why am I here? So went over to do the advocacy on the Manning Center side on Canada Strong and Free. But he did write a rather scathing article, I believe it was in the National Post in June of 2022. He was saying that we need an education minister to fight wokeism and critical race theory in particular. And basically, he had argued shortly after the election in early June that Stephen Lecce cannot be the Minister of Education again. And then Doug Ford had made him the Minister of Education again. Jamil gave examples in his article. He said, Mike Ramsey, who is a... well, I don't know about after these elections. I'd have to double check, but this is before the municipal election in October, he was a trustee for the school board, the public school board in Waterloo. And he had put forward a motion with Cindy Watson, another trustee, about saying like, hey, we should look into this critical race theory stuff and see how it's being implemented in our school system and the effects of it. And he was censored. He was censored by his fellow trustees to not speak and not be allowed to speak at trustee meetings. And Mike Ramsey's black. And I think he's the only black one on the board. And then Jamil goes on to say, like, but the education system's failing. He said fewer than 50% of grade 6 students across Ontario that take the standardized exam can properly do math. He said only 59% of those in grade 3 who take the provincial-wide standardized tests are actually adequate. And he said between, I think, 2019 and 2020, or either 2020 and 2021, there was a 23% decrease in grade 9 students taking the standardized test in mathematics. So all this new money is going into the system. It's not producing actual results. It's producing crazy results. Kids are being suspended. They can't even come to school. They're not actually being taught reading, writing, and arithmetic. And they're being taught this wokist, cultural Marxist stuff. And yet James Moore doesn't want us to talk about it. Had Canada Strong and Free.
Which I really appreciate the fact that, you know, you and I are conservatives. We do a lot of work within the Conservative Party, provincially, federally, across the country. But we're not afraid to call out conservatives, obviously, based on this podcast. But a lot of conservative, like gun rights activists groups, and people, tax organizations and stuff, they don't want to call out conservatives when they do stuff wrong, because they want to be friendly. They want to have them on their, in their organizations and whatever the case may be, right? But I actually appreciate the fact that Jamil is actually calling out conservatives when they're doing something wrong.
And by name.
Which is really refreshing and needs to happen more because, I don't know what they're going to be called in Canada, but we need to get out these rhinos because they're destroying conservatism in Canada, and we need to regain it back and make it even stronger, or else we're going to be stuck either with Justin Trudeau or someone implementing Justin Trudeau's policies and cultural changes just under a different name.
Like Doug Ford.
Yeah.
Nature communicates with us in a universal language. The sunrise starts a new day. The sunset marks our accomplishments.
The most beautiful communication is where the speaker and the listener match perfectly and understand the same message.
Your future audience is waiting to hear from you. What message do you need to share?
At LaRosse Media, we fashion beautiful communications through our professional video production services and marketing strategies.
Create your own most beautiful message. Visit larosmedia.com and be sure to check out our extended service options.
Dream, produce, market, succeed with LaRosse Media.
Serving Canada from coast to coast to coast.
Well, on that note, we'll move into our final segment, and we haven't done a top 10 in a while. We're going to do a top 10 in commemoration of Valentine's Day, which was last week. And
what did you guys do for Valentine's Day?
So we went out in the evening. So this is just so typical. We went out and had a few drinks at a pub in the evening, and then we went and got dessert somewhere, which was actually really nice. Also, I never drink anymore, so I had 2 pints of beer, and I was feeling real good, which normally would not happen to me. So I was happy about that. But it sucked because we got home, I was feeling really good, and then went to bed, and then at like 1 a.m, woke up to my toddler just exorcist vomiting everywhere, which then proceeded into like a full week of just insane flu in our house that went from one person to the next person to the next person. I personally couldn't move for 2 days. The only person that didn't get super affected was my husband, Aaron. So he's done, even though he wasn't sick, he has done an insane amount of work taking care of the kids and the household. And he had to take some days off, and kudos to him because that was really brutal. And apparently while I was sick, my 9-month-old son was just puking everywhere, and it was just so sad when babies throw up. And they said he just was so tired, and he just like rest his head against the cold floor. And toddlers and babies, they don't know like where to do it either, so it's just like a mess everywhere. Like they haven't learned to use a can or a toilet or something. So it was a Valentine's Day to remember. It started off really well, but then it devolved into utter chaos, which
reality. It devolved into reality.
Yeah. So what did you guys do?
Ours wasn't that bad. We were all sick, including our daughter. So we do co-sleeping, so we all sleep together in the same bed. And a few days after that, actually, I think that night going into the next day, my daughter, I guess, was coughing and sneezing into my eye because we usually sleep nose to nose, face to face. And I got pink eye the next day, and I was supposed to go up to Ottawa for some meetings and see some friends while I was up there for work, and I had to cancel all that. Still had to go up to Ottawa because I had to get the mail. But anyway, for Valentine's Day, we have a tradition where we watch a movie, usually like a crime movie, and we make an epic plate of nachos and drink beer and all that type of stuff. So I got this really, really, really good fake beer for my wife because she's pregnant. So I drank the real beer and made an epic plate of nachos. And we watched the movie. The movie sucked, which is too bad.
What was it?
It's called Inside Man. It has both Christopher Plummer and Denzel Washington. So we thought this will be good. And it was pretty atrocious. It was pretty awful. Should have watched the Jets game instead because it was a rare win because there have only been 500 since the new year. So that would have been good to watch, but
yeah, your wife would have loved
whatever. There was flowers, there was chocolates. So
fun fact, next year Ash Wednesday is on Valentine's Day. So prepare.
Yeah.
Prepare for that. All right. So the final segment of the podcast, we count down our top 10 romantic movies. So they could be just drama or rom-coms or whatever. Anything with romance in them basically is how I defined my list. And as I was writing mine, I kind of realized that I am my list is very sad. Like it's with sad romance movies.
But that's real romance, right?
It wasn't like cheery, lighthearted, but anyway, well, we can get into it.
Sure. I took over an hour to do this, and I was going through thinking about it. I was doing some research, like, have I seen any of these films like on AFI's top 100 and stuff like that? And I was like, I need to watch. I thought, because I like to think that my movie watching is very, there's a great variety to it and whatnot. And I realized this is a blind side of mine. So I gotta pick it up. But okay, do you want me to stop or
Yeah,
stop?
go ahead.
Do you want me to start? Okay. Number 10, because you have to have Meg Ryan in there, Sleepless in Seattle.
Okay. Yeah, it's funny because I have not seen Sleepless in Seattle. I haven't seen like When Harry Met Sally, You've Got Mail. I haven't seen any of those. So I should watch them at some point, but I never watch movies anymore. So one day when I'm old. But so you like that one? That one's in the top 10.
Yeah, it's of those like Meg Ryan ones that you just mentioned. Like You've Got Mail is based off of Shop Around the Corner, which is a Christmas romantic movie with James Stewart. And once I watched that a few years ago, I was like, okay, this is way better. And then I'm not a fan of When Harry Met Sally. Okay. I think it's very annoying, and I don't find it romantic at all.
I know. Whenever I was doing a little bit of research too, and I was looking at all the lists, and a lot of the lists had The Notebook in like their top 5, and I think that movie is like the worst movie of all time. Yeah, it's not romantic at all in any way.
It's not on our list. Yeah. So if we're not finding that when Harry met Sally and the Notebook is romantic. This will be very interesting.
Mine is a super weird list. I will say.
Okay.
Okay, my number 10 is a movie called The Winslow Boy. It's a period piece. I love period. I think that period pieces are probably the most romantic. I love Jane Austen. Like, you can't really. I hate things that are really in your face, like too much. And I like it when there's a little bit of like. There's subtlety and you don't really 100% know. Like even at Pride and Prejudice at the end, there's like a kiss and you know, but it's not like too much, right? Like it's just sort of. So The Winslow Boy is probably the most like that because at the end there's a hint of like potentially maybe something will happen, but there's not even remotely anything outgoing about their romance, but it is still in that way. It's probably, it's incredibly romantic. And the whole movie is about this family, this well-to-do family whose son gets accused of stealing while in Navy school. And so the dad is so intent on keeping up their reputation that he hires this MP and barrister to defend this boy. And he's not, they're really into the suffragette movement. This MP is against it. He's against everything they stand for. But while he gets to know the family and he defends vigorously this boy, and the boy has an older sister who immediately catches his attention. It kind of talks about the case and shows their blossoming hatred turned romance, and it's really, really good. It was done in 1999 and it's based off a 1946 play, so if you haven't seen it, I definitely recommend The Winslow Boy.
Who's in it?
I don't know. It's not anyone famous that I like. Maybe famous
even better
in Britain, but like British actors. But no one. I can't remember the actresses' names. Yeah.
Fair enough. Yeah, I'm gonna put that. Listen, I have to download a bunch of movies for when I'm on the plane because the Wi-Fi sucks. So,
however, I think Oriana would like this. You should watch it with her.
When do we get to watch movies? Like, we can watch. We have to watch them in bits and pieces. Yeah. So that's fair enough. Also, my wife hates romantic.
That's what I mean. It's not like overtly.
That's fair.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, number 9. This is going in a completely different direction. This is a little old school for those of us around our age. 10 things I hate about you.
That's hilarious. I'm glad that I'm glad that your 9 is sort of corny because mine is super corny. So
okay,
I like that one. It didn't make my list, but it definitely has an honorable mention, I think. Yeah.
Okay. What's your number 9?
Sweet Home Alabama.
Yeah, I was wondering if that was going to make it in. Okay.
It's one of I think it's out of all the gross, horrible, terrible rom-coms, it's definitely got a good story. It's up there. It's funny. I like it.
Okay, that's good. So like number 9 was like a throwaway for both of us. Number 8, like I consider this to be a romantic movie. Jerry Maguire.
Okay. Yeah, that's a good movie. Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of really good, really awesome classic movies that have romance in them. Would they be considered? Sure. If there's romance in them, they're a romantic movie. Jerry Maguire is really good. I like it.
Show me the money.
Yeah. Okay, my number 8 is kind of obscure too. Probably a lot of people haven't heard of it, but it's called Dear Frankie. And I don't know what year. It's probably in the 2000s, I would say. And it's one of the first Gerard Butler movies, which I know when you think Gerard Butler, like, ew, he's in terrible movies, they all suck. But this one is actually really good. It's about this single mother who little boy writes letters to his father, and she writes them back, like pretending to be the father. And then basically through a series of events, she needs to actually find a father for this guy. And so she she comes across Gerard Butler. And it sounds corny, the premise, but it's actually set in Ireland. And it's very sort of dark and dry and beautiful scenery. And it's really well done and understated. So I like it a lot. So yeah, Dear Frankie. It's a good movie.
Your list is much classier than mine. Actually, no, here we're going to class it up right here because I believe this is a Scorsese film. And I watched this with my pink eye when I was quarantined in Ottawa, and that is Age of Innocence.
Oh, I don't know that one.
Daniel Day-Lewis, Michelle Pfeiffer, and Winona Ryder from the early 90s. And it's basically based off I think it's based off of a book, not a real story. And it's a family in, it's a series of families in 1880s, I believe, New York City. very Victorian, even though, of course, at that point it wasn't the United States wasn't part of the British Empire. And basically, this girl that he grew up with came back from Europe because she had married basically for money, and she had married a count, and so she comes back as Countess Olenska, but she comes back with like all this scandal because she had left her husband. She's trying to set stuff up for her own because her husband was very abusive. And it just takes place over the next couple of years, and he's engaged to her cousin, who's Winona Ryder, who's very sweet and innocent. That's the age of innocence. But by defending his wife's or his fiance's cousin, he gets to know her, which is Michelle Pfeiffer, Countess Olenska. But he had grown up with her, and it kind of reveals, not to reveal too much later in the film, that had she stayed and not gone off to Europe, that he probably would have pursued her and not her cousin, and they fall in love, and then he makes the decision to follow through with his marriage anyway to Winona Ryder, and well, I won't ruin the end, but very, very well done, excellent dialogue, tasteful, like it's good, it's a good film.
Is Scorsese the director who said he's only going to make like 10 movies in his life, or is that someone else?
I think he's made more than 10 films, so I doubt it's Scorsese.
Okay. There's one of those main guys, but anyway. Okay, cool. I've never seen that, so I will put that on my list. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay, my number 7 is, again, sort of dark, but period. It's Wuthering Heights. And it has to be the Tom Hardy one. It has to be. Just women everywhere. So, yeah. Good book. Good movie. Sad.
Yeah, I was going to say, did you read it?
Yep. Sad. Crazy. Like, I also think Jane Eyre is really romantic, but again, like, it also gave me nightmares as a child. So it's just one of those things. Those Jane Austen books, you know.
I've never married.
Bronte.
I've never read the Brontes. I've never read Jane Austen, but my wife loves Jane Austen, and I think she likes the Brontes too. So
yeah, the Brontes are like more kind of dark, I feel like, than
Jane Austen. Yeah.
But...
Okay, what number are we at?
6.
Number 6. I like this one because I like the ending. I like that I like this more for the cinematography than the story itself. I like that they went back to a classic musical. I like the way it was executed. And that's La La Land.
Okay. Interesting. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that one's okay. I didn't love it, but I understand what you're saying about those. Like, considering modern day Hollywood, it was refreshing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
For sure.
Yeah. Yeah.
And Ryan Gosling, like, come on, Canadian boy. Always
talented.
Always good.
Had no idea he was a triple threat like that. There we are.
Okay, my number 6 is a movie called Return to Me. It's with Minnie Driver and David Duchovny. I think was made in the 90s, maybe late 90s. It's very heartwarming. It's it's sort of sad at the beginning, but it's actually got a happy ending. So, but it's a little bit of a tearjerker.
I think that's one of our first happy endings in a while. So,
but really good acting, really heartwarming, and just a cute movie. It's a feel-good movie. Just you might cry at the beginning.
Number 5. I don't know if this counts as a romantic film or not, but I put it down as Princess Bride.
Okay, yeah. I was maybe going to put that on my list, but it again gets an honorable mention. But yeah, that's a good one, obviously. Will always stand the test of time.
Yeah.
My number 5 is While You Were Sleeping. It was also on my Christmas list, and I absolutely love that movie. I think it's hilarious. The acting is amazing. Got Sandra Bullock, Peter Gallagher. It's really, really good. Love it. Peter Boyle. It's so awesome. So yeah.
What year is that?
Again, I think it's in the 90s.
Nice.
Yeah.
Okay.
Movie.
What number are we at? 4?
Yeah.
The Vow.
Is that a what's his name book? Yeah.
No, well, it's based off of a real story. So basically, what happens is this husband and wife. She has some sort of accident or whatever, where she has this terrible amnesia and she can't remember. She can't really remember her husband at all, falling in love with him or anything like that. and the parents really didn't want her to marry him in the first place. And so now she like has no idea who he is, and he has to get her to fall in love with him again. Very, very good film. Tearjerker.
Okay,
of a film.
I thought it was a based on a book. What's that guy who makes
Nicholas Sparks.
Yeah. Is it a Nicholas Sparks
I don't know.
book?
I don't know. Maybe he did write it or
Okay.
not. I'm not gonna pretend that I know a lot about it, but I've seen it once and
Okay.
I thought it was good.
Interesting. All right, good to know. My number 4 is Ever After. Oh,
Drew Barrymore, right?
oh, I love it. Yes, so good. I'll never
Is
forget
that Heath
it.
Ledger too?
No. It's a guy. I forget his name, but he's gorgeous. Yeah,
Gorgeous.
Angelica Houston.
Yes, Angelica Houston. Yes. Number 3, Moulin Rouge.
Okay, I surprisingly that is not on my list, which is very bizarre because I'm obsessed with the soundtrack. Producer Dave and I,
Yeah.
we will sing that soundtrack all night long. We'll duet it every time we have a few drinks in us for sure. But
The music is phenomenal.
amazing.
Hugh McGregor, like his pipes are just unbelievable.
yeah.
Apparently Nicole Kidman was really, really apprehensive about doing any singing at all because of him. And not to give away the plot or anything like that, but the scene at the end, his acting in it, like I've never seen a cry scene like that before. Like it's
It's a great movie.
it's spot on.
Yeah.
Yeah. Laz Berman, right? Or Boz Lerman. Like it's
It's weird.
It's weird at the beginning. But once you get past the first 45 minutes, it's pretty good.
Yeah. Okay, my number 3 is The Sound of Music. Just the best. What can you say?
Captain Von Trapp. Yeah, Christopher Plummer doesn't get better than that. My number 2 is Gone with the Wind.
I have never seen Gone with the Wind. And you know what? I think it's because my mom doesn't like it. And so I've always sort of liked the similar romantic movies as her. And I just never put in the time. But I should, just on the basis of it's a classic. So I should watch it.
When I was living in Ottawa, I was flying home and I had to go from Calgary, right? Because Brandon to Calgary to Ottawa. So it was like a 4-hour flight. And again, the Wi-Fi was spotty. So I was like, okay, well, I'll watch like one of the WestJet movies. And there was Gone with the Wind. And I was like, well, it's a classic. People love it. It broke the box office back in 1939, which to date is still the best year that Hollywood has ever had for film. And because you had a bunch of things that year. You had Gone with the Wind, Wizard of Oz, Mr. Smith Goes to Washington, amongst a number of others. So I was like, okay, I'll sit down and watch it because I'm not going anywhere for 4 hours. And yeah, just one of the best films I had ever seen.
All right.
Love it. So you got to strap in.
Yep.
You got to like take a weekend away from the kids somewhere and because it's a lot.
Yeah.
It's a long one,
Yeah.
but it's great.
All right, cool. My number 2 is a movie called Moonstruck. It is with Cher and with Nicolas Cage, which I know sounds so weird, but it is
because he plays the Camerari or whatever it is. Yeah,
it is like the funniest. If you like this movie, you like my sense of humor. And if you hate it, then we just have different senses of humor. But it is hilarious. The acting is amazing. I'm pretty sure it won some Academy Awards. Nicolas Cage is like absolutely amazing in the movie. His character is awesome. It's so weird, but it's also, and it's so aggressive, if I can say that. Like there's I went from like so much subtlety to zero subtlety, but it's aggressive in a very good way. And they're Italian, so they just say what they mean and they mean what they say, and it's super, super great. So have you seen it?
No, I haven't.
Oh man, it's really, really good. Put it on your list.
That will go on the list. Okay. Honorable mentions.
Oh, I don't have any, but I would say Moulin Rouge for sure. Definitely. The Princess Bride. Yeah, I don't know. I can't really think of any. Just the ones on your list, basically. I was always considering those, but I can't really think of anything that we haven't mentioned yet.
I have a couple. Again, throwing back things to the 90s. Freddie Prinze Jr., She's All That.
That's amazing.
And then, I don't know if this is
Do you
a
know me and
romantic
Freddie
film or
Prinze
not.
Jr. have the same birthday? Fun fact.
Really?
March 8th.
Okay. So talking about Freddie Prinze Jr., of course, you have to talk about Sarah Michelle Gellar. And so I don't know if this is a romantic film or not, but I think it's a very interesting film and the writing is excellent, is Cruel Intentions.
Okay. I haven't seen that either. Yeah.
I think you would like Cruel Intentions.
Okay. I won't read into that too much, but okay.
Oh, wait. Number one.
And my dishonorable mention would, of course, be The Notebook, because I think it's a truly atrocious film. I hate it. I don't think it's romantic at all. It's full of like cheating and weirdness, and it's just awful. So I'm sorry if you like it, but no.
I wrote you a letter every day.
Whatever. Okay. My number one is so obvious. Pride and Prejudice. And I didn't want to put like the BBC version.
Which one?
I didn't want to do two of the same. So I just put them together. However, the BBC version is like, if you've ever read Pride and Prejudice, it is word for word, like exactly the same as the book. And it's amazingly done. It's super like 1,000 romantic scenes. But I will say the Keira Knightley one is also really good. It just takes out like 90% of the book and keeps like, 7 of the best scenes or whatever. But it's also really well done, and I like it as well. So the BBC version is 1,000% accurate, and the Keira Knightley one is just fun to watch and amazing soundtrack.
BBC was Colin Firth?
Colin Firth, yeah.
That's what I thought. Yeah. Okay. My number one, I think, is better than your number one, and that is Casablanca.
Okay.
Have you seen
I
it?
have not.
Okay, that's not that long of a film. You need to see it. Humphrey Bogart, Inga Bergman, like it is such a good. Like there are so many famous lines from that film that we use like every day now.
Yeah.
It's a film noir. It takes place during the war. Like it is so excellent. It'd be so worth your time.
Yeah, for sure. I got to put it on the list again. Just never had an interest, but
well, look at this. Like I think we've added to each other's to watch list.
For sure.
So.
You got to send me your list because I'll forget.
Just watch the podcast.
Yeah. Oh yeah, this is recorded.
Yeah.
All righty. Well, thank you guys for joining us. We'll be back in a couple of weeks. Make sure that you subscribe so you don't miss when a new video comes out. We're on YouTube, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, basically anywhere you get your podcasts. Make sure you go to our website, itstartsrightnow.ca, to find this episode or past episodes. Leave a comment. Write to us if you have any questions or comments or anything you want us to discuss on air. We'd be happy to talk about that. And thanks for joining us, and we'll see you next time.
Bye for now.